Hello, it's Maggie, the Cheshire Crafter here. Well, spring is definitely here, isn't it? And in the UK, we're looking forward to the coronation of Charles and Camilla. That's King and Queen. And I thought it'd be very jolly to acknowledge that in patchwork form. So I'm going to share with you here some patchwork, I would say picnic blanket or tablecloth size patchwork pieces. Using a disappearing 4-patch in 2 different designs. Come with me into the kitchen and I'll show you what I did. So in this video I'll show you how to make the topper, and I'll do part 2 where I show backing, quilting and trimming. Come back for that, won't you? Let's take a look at my fabrics then. My fabrics are very regal. Some of them were developed for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and as you know, we're seeing the last of the Queen's head on the stamps now. They're going to be replaced by the King's head, and we've got regal crowns, we've got afternoon tea, and this has got flecks of gold in it, and then we've got the British Union Jack. So I would say that we've got 2 dark fabrics and 2 lights. I've linked it with a golden border and then an outer border which looks very regal, the purple, to tie it all together. The issue is that these 2 fabrics are directional and these 2 aren't, and they're all very busy fabrics. So the pattern that I'm going to choose needs to be, I need to mix them up, and I think I need to do that for my 4-patch. And then what to do I simply do a 4-patch like that, or do I cut them up further? Let's see what pattern I want to come up with. So from each piece of fabric I'm going to get 9 6-inch squares. I found an easy way to cut these with using 2 rulers. I use the smaller square ruler to get my 6-inch width, and then place my long ruler alongside it. This way I can slide my ruler without punching up the fabric all the way along to make sure that my 6-inch is correct. Hold this down with a dumbbell, but just to be certain I measure this with a tape just to make sure, but I get a good 6-inch that way each time. So I'm sewing again at my kitchen table with my Singer hand cranked machine. This is the 99K, and this time I've put a Coats Moon, which is a really strong polyester thread, in the top and the bobbin. Now I wasn't sure whether this machine would like a synthetic thread, but actually I tested it and it sewed fine. The other thing that I've done on this is I've altered the stitch length by turning this knob. I can't remember which way I turned it now. It's either clockwise or anti-clockwise, and I've got a stitch length of about a 2. I did try to change the needle, but actually a universal needle wouldn't fit in. That was interesting. I think I'll have to use Singer needles on this machine. It was just a universal, and it kept catching this presser foot edge, and it was a bit too thick to fit properly in here. So that's worth knowing, isn't it? So for this machine, Singer needles only. And now that I've put that needle in, you can see that it's sitting very well, and it's not, I know full well it's not going to catch the presser foot on the way down for this. I've got the same cotton in the top and the bobbin. Let's begin. 2 good quality cottons lie on top of each other very well, as long as they're laid out rightly. I don't need to pin it. And I've got my tape and my magnetic marker. I'm going to sew 1/4-inch seams throughout, and you'll notice I'll start chain piecing, and you'll notice on this machine it doesn't like to go backwards, so I'm not going to be doing any forward or back stitches on this machine. To get the orientation right, as I present this fabric to the machine, I can see that the crowns are upside down. So is the postage stamp fabric, but it's underneath this top piece. If I just keep chain piecing and keep repeating that way, I'll get the pattern right. Make sure you get it right. I got the first one wrong. Make sure you get it right before you chain piece them all. I find it helps to keep a patterned piece either on the shelf or in front of me, just to refer back to, because it's so easy to get muddled up. I'm recommending finger pressing here, and finger press to the darker pattern, and then as you put the two pieces together, those seams will nest, and I'm going to pin at that point. Keeping your seam straight, when you pin, it will look like that, and when you sew over it, you'll have an even number of seams each side of this seam line. Sew over it like that, and then when you open it out, it will look like that. I'm pleased to say that these are in the right orientation. Right, I'm going to complete that on all 9 of my blocks. These are now 11.5 inches square, and I'm going to use my 12.5 inch ruler to cut into these. I'm placing my 1.5 inch on the centre fold, and I'm going to cut 1.5 inch away here with my rotary cutter. I don't have a rotating mat. I'm going to do that turning my fabric 4 times. Let me show you how. I use a dumbbell to make sure my ruler doesn't slip on my fabric, and I've marked this tape line at 1.5 inch so that I've got a really good guide, visual guide to help me, and I'm going to cut here. Rotated my fabric 90 degrees, and I'm going to repeat the process 3 more times. So I've now got 9 pieces. I'm going to leave my 4 corners in the same place, and I'm going to swap over this for this, and because of the orientation on the crown and the stamp, I'm going to leave them the correct orientation up. Likewise, I'm going to do that for that, but the one in the middle I'm going to turn that way, so that one's upside down. At least I've got a teacup the right way up, and then I'm going to sew them together in rows. 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows, and then I'm going to sew row 1 to row 2, 2 to row 3, and I'm going to do that the same orientation on all 9 squares. I test 1 square at a time before I continue with the rest, just in case I've got it wrong at this point, and then I leave that to one side so I can refer back to it, a little bit like I did with the pattern on the 4 patch. Now give them a good press with the steam iron. Your squares will now measure 10.5 inches across, and I'm going to sew these squares together. They're a 9, so I'm going to sew them as if they were a 9 patch. 3 squares together at a time, sorry, 3 blocks together at a time, and then the top block to the middle block and the middle block to the lower block. My second design is cut on the diagonal, but I'm going to show you that I start off with the 4 patch in the same way. I'm going to use my ruler, and at each corner I'm going to mark with an erasable ink pen. You can use a chalk pen if it's not going to show up on a darker fabric, but I'm going to mark at 2.5 inch at each corner. Then I'm drawing a line from each point to the far corner, so that when I take my ruler away, the mark will show up. It shows up better on a lighter fabric than it does on the dark fabric, but I can still see it. And I'm going to do the same here. Now, again, because of the orientation, I'm going to leave the 4 outer pieces in place, and I'm going to swap over the top and the bottom and the right and the left. And then I'm going to swap over the middle, turn it upside down. So there's no two pieces the same. And I'm going to sew this the same as I did the previous one, but my diagonal line now is going to be a straight line. So I'm going to sew that piece to here. And as I'm pinning, I'm going to make sure that I get this line here correct first, and then sew towards the end. Then I'm going to add this piece on, and I'm going to get this corner right and sew towards the end. And I'm going to do the same with the other three, and then I do the equivalent of I did before. This becomes row 1, row 2, row 3, and I'm going to sew row 1 and 2 together, and then 2 and 3 together until I'm sewing two pieces together here where one of them is on the diagonal, and there's actually quite a bit of stretch in that. If you find that you're distorting your fabric, I recommend that you spray this diagonal piece of fabric with starch, and it'll stop that stretching and distorting. I recommend that you finger press row 1 and row 3 with the seam going under the central piece and going outwards on the middle piece. Now I'm going to sew those together and they will nest. And I'm going to take great care to match up these seams in the centre. As I'm sewing, I want my needle to come just to the right of this intersection here. Just like that at both points. When I open this out, you'll see that not only will they meet, but you'll get a nice neat point. There's 6 pieces of fabric meeting at that point, and I'm hoping that they'll iron as flat as I can get them. To avoid mistakes, I find it easier just to progress doing one of these blocks at a time. Once you've pressed it, you'll see that your block looks like this. You actually have longer points in the corners, so we need to use the ruler and just trim those so that the edges are flush with this centerpiece. So I'm going to cut those corners off, and I'm going to do that on all 4 sides. I now have a 10-inch block, and I need to make 9 of these and sew them together like I did previously with the other design to make a 9 by 9 square. Now that I've put that together like a 9 patch, you can see the pattern coming out on this one. And if we check it in grayscale, you can see there's a really good distinction between the darks and the lights here. And there's this lovely diagonal panel centrally that features. I think what you see most of all is the squares, but if you look in, there's a diamond shape in the middle of each, and that just adds interest to the overall patchwork. Now this now measures 29 inches. I need some good big borders on this. Adding my borders, I always add the side borders on and then do the header and the footer, and I do that with the inner and the outer border. This inner border measures 3 inches, my outer border measures 5.5 inches, and I don't do mitered corners. So let's take a look at the final pieces then. The patchwork can be altered to use any layer cake or charm square and cut in a certain way. You just alter your sizes. Don't forget to consider the orientation. You can see that the crowns and the postage stamps are the right way up here. The border on this one is brighter than the other, but overall I'm pleased with them. I think they're very regal and I hope you'll come back to watch me back them, trim them and quilt them. For now, this is Maggie the Cheshire Crafter saying come back and see me soon, won't you? Bye.